Imagine you come to study in Europe from another continent. Then, you go back and start making fun of your hometown friends for having unusual traditions and mocking them for their superstitions. You would be cancelled immediately. And so was the star of today's video. But this painting, derided and its inception, is now an iconic work of art. Ladies and gentlemen, we introduce you to Francisco Oller and his piece de resistance, El Velorio. Our story takes place in Puerto Rico, a Caribbean island with a population of more than 3 million. Today, it's an unincorporated part of the U.S., but back in the mid-19th century, it wasn't. And that's when a teenager laid claim to being a genius. Well, to be fair, he did not claim it. Others bestowed the praise on him. But during these times, the Spanish colony was transitioning from an agricultural economy to an industrial one. This attracted the interest of a lot of intellectuals and artists, like our boy genius Francisco Oller, who took an active interest in the rural Jibaros. The Jibaros were mostly farmers with a mixture of Spanish, indigenous, and African ancestry. While this was an interesting cultural mix, it also allowed syncretic traditions to flourish. Syncretic means deriving from different sources. And Oller's art was interested in understanding the complexities of this dynamic life. Born in 1833, Francisco Oller trained at a local gallery and was approached by Puerto Rico's governor when he was 15. The governor told him to get out of his sight. Maybe not like that, but he wanted to send the boy to Rome for further studies. The kid's mother thought he was not mature enough to live alone, so the opportunity passed him by. But the kid was determined. When he turned 18, he left for Madrid, where he studied at the Prado Museum, the most prestigious art institute in Spain. But that was not enough. He packed up and set off for the Louvre, where he studied under Gustave Courbet. For those of you who don't know Courbet, he's the granddaddy of Impressionists, Cubists in short, most modern schools of European art. He was a proponent of realism, and his insistence on portraying the dark side of reality made his paintings part of police reports. This man, quite evidently, wasn't afraid to rustle any feathers, and the quality rubbed off on his pupil. The pupil was also a larger-than-life figure, exhibiting artwork alongside Renoir and Monet in the day and singing Italian operas in the night. He spent 2 decades in Europe and hanging out with realist artists and impressionists. He developed a unique voice. No, not talking about his baritone vocals. His artistic voice was socially conscious as well as formally consummate. Enough big words and enough of France. Back to Puerto Rico he went, and so must we. There is no cure for homesickness, but Francisco, a man of various cultural affinities, could not just brush his critical eye aside. So he observed Puerto Rico with this critical eye, painting rural and urban landscape without romanticizing anything. His works, even the occasional historical ones, show a sincerity toward realism and social complexities. All of this led us to this. Ta-da! El Velorio, translated as The Wake, is a scene of, surprise, surprise, a wake. This is a Jibaro domestic building known as a bohio. In the center lies a 3-legged wooden table covered with a white tablecloth. This is a wake. The body of a dead child rests on the table. I say rests because it is one of only 2 solemn places in the composition. The second solemn entity is the older black man in ragged clothes, who stands above the child, seemingly lost in thought. However, as soon as we start to move away from the center, we notice the commotion. Let's head to the right side first. There's the mother, grieving with her eyes and smiling with her mouth. If we look closely, we can see that she is handing a drink to the priest. A priest who is not invested in the mother or even the child in the center of the frame. Instead, he looks above the child at a roasted pig. And so does the man on his right. The contrast of mortality dances between the child and the pig, both dead. One cherished and honored, the other gutted and roasted. The man between the two, the one holding up the pig, looks confused at the premise. A woman behind him peeks inside. Maybe she can glean some answers. To complement this abstract dance of mortality, a more literal dance occupies the top left of the composition. A man swinging himself from a rope tightened to the beam. At first glance, it might seem that the man is wailing out at the loss of the child. But the more one looks at him, the more he appears to be in song. Brandishing his hat on one side, he leads our eyes to the flock of musicians below him. A man plays some strings while plays the güiro. Musicians at a wake? If all of this seems a little jaded, do look around at the other people in the room. A man holds a machete under his arm. Is he eyeing the pig up top? No, he is eyeing the man on the other side of the room who is reaching up to get a machete of his own. A fight seems imminent. A machete for a machete, as they say. The woman in the yellow dress tries to calm down Machete Man number 1. But what about Machete Man number 2? She could possibly be his sister, but the little kid below them suggests wife. The kid pushes her out of the way. Is he up to some mischief? If he was, could you blame him? If the adults are playing machete, the kids can't be far behind. Even the animals are having a free-for-all. But getting back to the boy walking in the middle, we can make out what he is looking at. A couple of children in the corner with shocked faces. They've been interrupted by the dogs running around. Over their heads, a woman cries inconsolably. A man tries to console her, but as I said, she's inconsolable. Wait a minute. Is she the mother? So many twists in this painting, and she's about to get one too. A man is about to pour a bottle of wine on the mourning couple. As hectic as the scene is, there are some grounding aspects in the composition. The empty wooden chair being the most important one after the two central characters. So, what is this massive 8-foot 10-inch by 13-foot 6-inch painting about? The farming equipment, the dancing people, the commotion, the foodstuffs? Let's get the final twist out of the way, the ultimate reveal, as it were. This scene is a representation of Baquiñe, or Velorio de Angelito, a Puerto Rican wake held for an infant. Now, I hope I don't have to repeat what syncretic means, but this is a syncretic ceremony where the child's ascension to heaven is being celebrated. This was in line with the Hebrew culture's belief that children who died young turned into angels. The reasoning was quite straightforward. They could not have sinned, so they must make their way to heaven. A nice little thought. The custom has several different interpretations, changing from region to region and from people to people. Speaking of differences, the composition beautifully holds two ends of the spectrum together. The grieving parents on the right and the joyous bonanza on the left side of the deceased. The painting shows a combination of the sacred rites and the mundane rural routines, the rigor of death and the joys of life. The dynamism and visual tension is palpable, and Oller puts the raw facets of Puerto Rican on display. But what if I told you he was not impressed by these rituals? Remember when I said he did not romanticize the local life like some colonist would have done? Good, because here's another twist. Francisco Oller was an interesting guy. When he created this work in 1893, he was satirizing an orgy of brutish appetites under the guise of gross superstition. Boy, it is diplomatic to call that satire now. That's just straight up hating. We can even see what might be his own representation in the background as he walks away from the superstition and guides another generation along. Maybe he was leaving the rural settings' regressive ideas to return to the practical mindset of urban settlements like San Juan. To say that he had a low opinion of the ritual would be an understatement. The twists just keep on coming, don't they? But this was the last one, I promise. Francisco had dreamt of painting El Velorio for years before he put paint to canvas. He relocated from San Juan to the El Zaburo family estate in Carolina, where he prepared preliminary sketches. He was probably inspired by the composition of Courbet's A Burial at Ornans and took some cues from Rembrandt's Night Watch. Like that classical Dutch work, everything here has a sense of movement. The umbrella flutters and the plate with the flowers has fallen down, the chiaroscuro creating higher contrast, and the conflicting lines lead the viewer's eye from one detail to another. The richness of the nature outside, as opposed to the poverty of the farmers inside, shows the influence of his impressionist colleagues. In other words, he was impressed by them, pun intended. Francisco was working on a deadline because he recognized the significance of a specific date, the 400th anniversary of Puerto Rico's European discovery by Christopher Columbus. It won't come as a surprise that the local communities and critics did not appreciate it when he revealed his scathing social commentary on such an auspicious occasion. Reviews from the time were divisive, to say the least. Take these words, for instance. "This work is a crude satire of our customs, not in the comic vein like Cervantes, but biting like Voltaire. The depravity which Mr. Oller struggles with has never been approached in quite this way by any other naturalist painter immortalized by his work. There has only been a single French painter, along with his disciples, who has had the audacity to sustain such criticism. And believe me, Mr. Oller, those paintings will never be seen as masterpieces by posterity. The social reincarnation/immortality aspired to by the artist is not proper to art, but rather exclusive to the philosopher and the statesman." But posterity had other ideas, so in your face, critic man. Times were changing, and with the arrival of the industrial age, superstition lost its place in the market a little bit, and Francisco had a lot to do with that. See, he walked the walk. He opened an art school for young women to provide education. So he was part of the change. But there was a political change as well. Puerto Rico seceded from Spain in 1898, and the U.S. took over. No doubt that changed a lot of things. Over the decades, people started to gather around El Velorio, and someone finally said, "You know what? This is not so bad after all." Today, it is the foremost artistic treasure of the Puerto Rican people. Its legacy is set in stone, and others continue to pay tribute to it. Now, just like the two figures in the fields, it is time to leave the scene. And feel free to thank us for the ride by hitting that like button. For more interesting content, subscribe to the channel and smash that funky bell for notifications. Comments are welcome, so do share your thoughts below. We'll see you in the next one.